Welcome to Fulfillment in Faith, where we will dive deep into self-discovery, empowerment, and manifesting the life you desire. I'm your host, Shannon Mondor, and through my own experiences with addiction, sobriety, and personal growth, I've learned invaluable lessons that I'm passionate about sharing with you. Now let's start creating a life you love. Hello, everybody. My name is Shannon Mondor, and I am the host of my podcast, Fulfillment in Faith. I want to thank everybody for attending today because I have a very special guest, and her name is Malorie Avaline. Welcome, Malorie. How are you?
I am doing so well today, Shannon. Thank you for
I'm
having me.
so happy to have you. So, Mallory, let's just get into a little bit of your background here. So, if you can share that with the audience members. And then from there, if you just want to go right into your story, because I know what you have gone through.
Mhm.
Many women have been on that same journey and still continue to be on that journey. So, what you're about to tell us is extremely important for everybody to hear.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's important before I even get started to realize we're still on the journey,
Yes.
because even there's so many parts and pieces to my story that have led me to the position I am in life today, to be the woman that I am, to be doing what I'm doing in the world. And it still continues to unfold. In fact, I was on the phone with my mentor a couple weeks ago. We were doing a session. I think there's all kinds of sessions that people do as far as healing and trauma work and subconscious reprogramming and all these modalities that we have. And I was really in some deep emotion about some current things that I'm experiencing, which I'll share in a moment. And she had asked me, let me ask you this, Malorie, do you believe that the emotion that you're currently experiencing is disproportionate to the things that are going on in your life? And I stopped and I was like, whoa, that really puts it in perspective, because I think as these adult grown women, right, we're business owners and we're coaches and we're badasses, and well, I don't have time for chaos, and I don't have time for all these emotions and things. But we stop and we forget that we're also human, and that our journey continues to evolve, just like you and I were talking about before we hopped into this interview today, that our journeys continue to evolve. And so that's the thing that I'll start with and say that I'm still in my journey. I'm still in this story. I'm currently still in the process of going through a divorce. I recently came out. I don't know if you even know that. That's not even something that you and I have spoken about. There's all these parts of my story that I continue to uncover. And what I mean by that, I'll start and I'll try to put it in kind of a nutshell. But I live in Oklahoma. I grew up in a very blue collar family, with a dad that still today, even in his gray hair and his wheelchair, thinks that he's a gangster. I mean, I grew up on the back of Harleys, and he was, running cocaine for the Hells Angels. And there was a lot of unhealthy behaviors in my home. My dad is diagnosed bipolar. He's an extreme narcissist. Um, I saw a lot of affairs in my home growing up. There was a lot of drug abuse. There was a lot of alcohol abuse. There was a lot of mental and emotional abuse, and there was some physical abuse, not towards me, but towards one of my sisters. There was a lot of physical abuse that I saw between my father and her. But at the same time, we were certainly in church twice on Sundays and every Wednesday night and at every revival. And we were at everything the church hosted all the time. Right. And so I grew up hearing one thing and being told. It's very much that motto of like, do as I say, not as I do. And so I grew up, I really, and as I continue to, start writing my book and dive into, these past patterns and where our beliefs come from and how you talk about where our identities come from, I had this memory pop up that I decided I hated my dad when I was 11 because of the behavior that I saw. And also around that same time, I decided, like, Oh, I get it. We live in a hypocritical house. Got it. We're all hypocrites. We go to church on Sundays and we pretend like everything's great and like we're this amazing family when you guys are literally cussing each other out to and from church. You know what I mean? And so I grew up very conflicted. I grew up with a lot of spiritual gifts. I could see people's auras. I remember telling my mom at a very young age, somebody was hurt and she was tending to them. And I was probably 4 or 5. And I was like, Mom, it's okay. I can just lay hands on them and they won't hurt anymore. She was like, oh, Mallory, that's really sweet, but that's not how it works. I'm like, no, but it is how it works. Like I can lay hands on them and they won't hurt anymore. I don't think at that time I would have called it being healed. I just knew that what I believed and what I knew is that I could lay hands on somebody and they wouldn't hurt anymore. And then I slowly learned over time again, and I'm going to continue with this, is I learned what not to be. Well, if I'm naturally who I am, I'm going to be told I'm not that. If I'm naturally curious, I'm going to be condemned by the church. If I believe that I'm a healer, they're going to call me blasphemous. If you see that, like, there's this pattern that started forming in my life at a very young age. Like, it's not safe to be me. It's not safe to believe the way that I believe naturally. So in order to fit in order to be accepted, in order to not be the weird one, I need to learn to conform to what other people think and believe, right? And so I started to do that in my life. And then fast forward a little bit, I had a pretty rough bout with my teenage years. I was introduced to cannabis. That's the name we all call it now. But I think back then it was just pot or weed, introduced to pot when I was 14. By 17, I was eating ecstasy, taking ecstasy, whatever you want to call it. And by 18, I was like full blown into cocaine and meth at 18 years old. And because I lived in this very hypocritical household where I was like, wait, they say do this, but they don't actually do it. And so I'm just a confused 18-year-old kid. And my parents are fighting all the time. And so I found joy in drugs and partying and going to raves and, staying out at these clubs till 6 o'clock in the morning and lying to my mom about where I was. And that led me down a really, what I look at now, I'm like, wow, that was a pretty dark path, 18 years old. And I'm stepping into strip clubs and nightclubs and places an 18-year-old has no business being, and that's I actually met my first husband in a club, and got married at 21 years old and found myself very quickly in not only a controlling, manipulative marriage, but an abusive marriage. And it started out, I think, how they all start out, a little bit of mental, a little bit of emotional, a little bit verbal. And then once they have you in that song and dance, it's very easy for it to become physical, and I very quickly found myself in very severe meth addiction. Severe. I'm a 5'6" woman, maybe 150 pounds, an average size woman, I would say. I was 107 pounds.
Wow.
I was tiny. I was just out of it, just like checked out of life, really. But interestingly enough, I had this foundation of the way that I was raised. And even though it was very hypocritical, I was exposed to a lot of religion. I was exposed to a lot of different types of churches. I was even taken to a Jewish synagogue because of my dad's side of the family. So I was exposed to spirituality, whether you want to call it religion or whatever it was. I was exposed to a higher power. And I feel that I truthfully had connected to that higher power at different times in my life, but I'd kind of left it behind. And during that time, in the deepest part of my addiction, I kept having this reoccurring dream. And I was in this dark hotel room in the dream, and I was being invited to the light. And I looked at the light, and the light was bright and it was beautiful. And it was this window across from the room. But I would always tell myself, no, you don't deserve to be in the light. It's like, well, but just come over here in it. It's warm over here and it's bright and it's lovely and it's beautiful. Like, come to the light. And I would always talk myself out of going to the light. Like I need to be punished. Like, no, I've done this to myself. I have to stay in this place. And one evening, I wrote myself a letter, and I promised myself, I was talking to myself and God. I was like, okay, like if there's this God that's there somewhere, wherever you are, because I don't really know anymore. I'm going to talk to you, and I'm going to make a promise to myself and whatever this God is that's out there, that I want to get clean. I want to get sober. I want to become a mother. I really wanted to have a baby. And I laid down drugs that night. I never went to rehab. I never like went to a program. I never did any of those things. I made a decision that evening that I was done living the life that I had lived. 3 months later, I found out I was pregnant with my son, who will actually be 18 here in a week and a half. Wild to, watch him grow up. I always tell him he helped save me. I got sober that night, writing myself that letter. I laid it all down. I was like, I'm done with this life. This part of my life is done. And I'm kind of that way. I make very distinct decisions, and I draw a line in the sand, and I'm like, oh, okay, we're done. Like, there's no talking me out of this. We're done. So I was done. So I got pregnant. 3 months later, I found out I was pregnant with my son. So by the grace of God, I was clean when I was sober when I got pregnant. And having him is what gave me the courage to leave that marriage. I left that abusive marriage a year after, right after my son's first birthday. Fast forward in life, I was building my career. I was a single mom for a while. I started dating again. I got married 4 years later. So I ended up getting married again when my son was between 5 and 6 years old. And a lot of life has happened since then, right? I mean, like I said, he's going to be 18 next month. And now I am going through another divorce that's lingering. And so it's really interesting because obviously there's a lot of time that happens in between then. But I think one of the biggest things that happened for me is I kept choosing the thing that I thought people expected from me, the thing that I thought people wanted me to do, the thing that was safe for me, the thing that other people would tell me is good for me. And so I chose
Can I ask you something?
yeah.
Now that you are where you are and you've seen your first marriage and your second marriage, what is it from your first marriage that you brought to your second marriage, which was the downfall as well too?
Mhm. I think it's a few things. I think the word expectation comes to mind. I think that we have these expectations on a partner to be something for us, to fill a void, to show up for us. Cause that was a big lesson of mine these last couple years. Is I would sit on my meditation mat and I would cry. And I very much look at God very different now. I don't look at God as this man in the sky, but I look at God as this entity, this energy that is within us. I call it our God self.
Mhm.
And so I'm praying, I'm moving energy, I'm meditating, and I'm crying because I'm like, I'm so sick and fucking tired of begging this man to love me, of trying to convince him to love me, to treat me like I know I deserve to be treated. And not that he treated me badly. He was not abusive. He was very, very kind. He's still very kind. We're friends. We get along. But he was not interested in the same things. He did not have the same zeal for life. He was not excited about the things I was excited about. I would watch my friends get flowers for no reason and get taken on dates. And I'm like, you don't do that for me. Like, I don't even get a happy birthday card. You know what I mean? Like, I don't get celebrated. And so I remember this moment on my mat crying and like asking God, like talking to this all-knowing divine intelligence that I speak to all the time, that is me, that is you, and I'm having this conversation with the universe, and I'm like, why bawling? I'm like, why won't he just love me like I want him to love me? And I'm bawling, and I hear this like stillness come over me, and it says, you need to learn to love you how you expect other people to love you.
Yes. And the reason I had to ask you that question, and it was just like, you got to ask her that question, is because I look at my past now and there's patterns,
Oh
right?
yeah.
So any of the audience members that are listening to this, look at, and that's why I love teaching about identity and
Yeah.
vibration. Love it. Was because I can see now that, I had patterns. And so
Yeah.
there was a pattern with you as well, right? There's a pattern with everybody.
Yeah.
And it's just such a pivotal moment when you can actually see those patterns and you're like, oh my
Yeah.
God, light bulb moment.
Yeah. No, I chose him because it was safe. Again, because this morning, I was sitting and journaling, thinking about this very thing. Because I'm like, why did I choose him? You know what I mean? Like, what? Well, it was this idea of safety, right? I've known him since third grade. We were friends, like our whole lives. We were friends in elementary school. And so there's this idea of safety, like this, it's all perception, right? Like, well, this person knows me. This person will accept me. This person will love me, even though I've been through all this shit and made all these bad decisions and wasn't a very good person for a while and all these things. And so there was this expectation of him to feel something within me. And really it was through that journey of self-love from that moment on my meditation mat that I was like, oh shit, well, there it is. So I started dating myself. I started buying myself flowers. I
Mhm.
started taking myself to nice lunches. I started loving on me the way I wanted someone else to love on me, holding me, being there for me, the way that I had wanted someone else to do. And that was a pivotal moment for me when I realized I was no longer fulfilled in this marriage that I was longing for. And I mean, there's a lot more to the story. I mean, there was affairs and other things, not on my side, on his side. And I tried to do the thing, right, that they tell you to do, like marriage is about long suffering and marriage is about forgiveness and marriage is about all these things. And it was like, okay, I'm going to forgive and I'm going to keep inviting you into my world and keep calling you forward and keep calling you up. And I just was done. I was exhausted. And in the midst of that, we were living very separate lives, totally different schedules, totally different friends. I mean, for years this went on, and I met someone online, a woman. And this last year, really coming up on a year, has been a journey of revisiting that little girl version of me that was attracted to girls, that
Mhm.
didn't understand why her friends were boy crazy and like wanted all the boys' attention. But again, I grew up in this very Christian household that was like, women don't marry each other. People that are the same sex, they can't build a life together because you can't have children and you can't have this and you can't have that, right? And this last year has been a journey for me of revisiting the parts of me that I've disconnected from. Like, wait a second, that was actually always there for me. Like, I actually kissed a girl before I kissed a boy as a teenager. It's like that first kiss moment. And it's like, oh, well, mine was with a girl before it was with a boy.
So
And so
did you always kind of know that you were attracted to women, or you just
oh,
kind of
oh, no,
kind of
absolutely.
ignored it? You just like,
Oh, no, I definitely was. I mean, I was with women intimately before I was with men
okay,
intimately.
okay,
Yeah. But it
okay.
was this part of me, again, that's why I say this, like, I learned to turn these parts off of me because it wasn't socially acceptable, or it wasn't accepted in the church that I was in, or it wasn't accepted in the family that I was in. It's not acceptable to be the loud, boisterous girl, right? Like, oh, tame yourself and be polite and only speak when you're spoken to. And it's not safe to be the eccentric girl. You're too weird. Like, dial it back, Mal. My whole life I've been told, like, get your head out of the clouds, come back to reality. You live in an alternate universe, Mallory. And it's like, oh, okay. Like being told by my mom when I was 4 years old, like, that's really sweet, honey, but you can't heal people with your hands.
Yeah.
Only to get into my healing journey and have had people tell me, wow, Mallory, like you really have a gift of healing. When
Yeah.
you lay your hands on me and pray, I feel my energy move. And so it's like, this last like 2 years, I really feel like has been like me pulling back these pieces of myself that I gave away or that I diminished or I didn't let be seen, out of fear of rejection or fear of judgment or whatever it is. And so now I feel like I'm in this full circle moment of like, who does Malorie get to be now? And that's why I say the journey continues, you know? I actually do have a very good relationship with my now second ex-husband. I never thought I would say that, you know, but we do have a good friendship, and he understands. He's the one that came to me and said, I want you to know that if we don't work out and you end up with a woman, I'm not going to be shocked, and I'm going to support you.
Mhm.
Because a lot of people are going to walk out of your life, Malorie. A lot of people are going to judge you. And even though I have failed you as a husband, I want you to know that I will always be your friend, and I will always support you because I know you better than the majority of people on this planet, which is a very true statement.
Yeah.
And so I'm in this journey of continuing to uncover who am I? Who are we? You talk a lot about identity. You know, who are we without these identities that we attach ourselves to, or these dogmatic religions, or this family name and prestige? Because like, oh, don't you dare ruin the family name with your truth. You know what I mean? It's like when
Yeah,
I
I've
first
experienced that one for sure. For sure.
yeah, it's tough, you know? And so we are all on these journeys, and it's like, it doesn't stop. I'm 41 years old, and I feel like I've lived so much life, and there's been so many versions of Malorie. And I'm like, now I'm like, ooh, like what's next? Because now I'm not afraid. You know, like there was a period in my life where I was very afraid, like, oh, this is the safer option. I need to choose this. And now I'm like, I don't care.
Mhm.
I would rather be the poster child that is a walking permission slip of bravery for other women that are like, wait, I'm not this. That like my whole identity is not being a mother. My whole identity is not being a wife. My identity is who this divine intelligence created me to be when my soul chose to come inhabit a body. Who was that person before the world told her who she was? And so that's what I feel like I'm getting back to right now.
And then even looking back at, the past self, I look at myself and I'm like, I was such a small human being, so
Yeah.
small, and then I look back at my past friendships and relationships and all of that, right? And, those individuals, they look at me now, we literally have nothing in common, but they do
Yeah.
truly believe that they think that they know me. And
Yeah.
it's no, you don't know me. And the
Don't.
reason I can tell you that you didn't know me is because I did not know myself.
Yeah.
Now I know who I am, and you don't know who I am at all.
Yeah.
Because you always hear people say, "Oh, I know you. I know you." Actually, no, you don't, because
Like you knew the
I
version of
know
me
me.
that I allowed you to see.
Yes. You
Yeah.
seen the scared, fearful version,
Yeah.
where I'm like you. There's nothing that scares me anymore. I
Yeah.
am who I am. I'm living my true, authentic self. And the
Yeah.
people that I've attracted are the most loving, amazing people that have been on their journey and are at the same level as me. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's absolutely wonderful.
Mhm.
So through your whole journey, like what you're saying right now is so extremely powerful. And you've gone through so many experiences, so many aha moments. But is there one particular one that you feel resonates the most with you?
Yeah. When people ask me, when did your spiritual awakening start? I really pinpoint the moment that I had my daughter. My daughter is 8. And I'll tell you why. And you're somebody that's experienced addiction, so you're very familiar with the numbing that we do, right? That's what drugs and alcohol do. They numb those feelings. And so I spent, nearly 8 years of my early adult life numbing. And so when I had my son, I was 23 when I had him. I was newly sober. I was like, give me the epidural, give me the pain pills, give me the morphine drip. Like, I don't want to feel this. This is going to be awful, right? Because as humans, we're conditioned to believe childbirth is difficult. It's hard. It's the worst pain you'll ever experience as a woman. And I was like, well, I don't want no part of that. My life's been painful enough. Like, I don't want to feel this. Well, after all the growth and the healing and the everything over a 15-year period, when I was having my daughter, I said, I'm having a natural birth. I mean, I knew from the moment that I conceived, because we went through IVF. So I knew the day that I had conceived, I knew. I was like, I'm having a natural birth. I want to feel everything. I want to know everything. I want to be fully present in my body, my emotions, my thoughts, my feelings. I want to feel it all. And so I spent 9 months reading every book I could get my hand on natural birth, watching documentaries, learning about the business of birth, learning about the mind-body connection. I came up with all of these affirmations. It was during my pregnancy that I first explored visualization. Now, visualization is something I teach my clients. It's one of my favorite things to walk a group of people to at a workshop or a seminar. Like, I absolutely love visualization, but I did not know anything about it at that point. And so I had signed up for this class called Hypnobirth. Maybe some people are familiar with it, but it's a process of hypnosis, particularly for the birthing process. And so I started to learn about, ambient music and frequency sounds and affirmations and repeating things in your head and I am statements. I started to learn all of these things during my pregnancy. And I would play these CDs because, back in the day, we used to put things on CDs, and I would play these CDs in my living room over the surround sound. And I would just get in this like transcendent state. And like, my body is meant to birth a baby. You can do anything for a minute. God intelligently designed your body to birth a baby. Women have birthed babies for centuries without drugs. Like, I would create all these affirmations. And I am not kidding. Like, I get chills as I even remember this moment, but bringing my daughter into the world was by far the closest I've ever felt to God, the most powerful I've ever felt as a woman, and the most spiritual experience of my entire life. I mean, it was transcendent to bypass the pain, right? Not even bypass it, transmute it. Like, we didn't even call it contractions. We called them surges. So changing the framework around the terminology for birth, right? Which we can apply to everyday life. Like, is it difficult? Or are you being presented with an opportunity of growth, right? Like, we can change the simplest terminology in our day-to-day life. And so it was through that process of choosing to have my daughter unmedicated and be fully present for everything that was coming up in my body and my mind and my soul, everything. That moment changed me. Like, I left that hospital, like, you could have put a superwoman cape on me. I'm like, I'm a bad bitch. Like, can't nobody tell me nothing. Like, I can do all things. And it was that moment of having her natural that I'm like, we are really capable of anything that we choose and believe to be capable of. And that was the moment everything changed for me. I mean, I went on to open, I already had an existing business, but I went on to open my first brick and mortar business, build a team, started investing in myself, hired coaches, I've gotten certified in so many different things. I just became obsessed with human potential at that point. Now I'm still obsessed with it. Like, the human potential, it's fascinating to me because it's a decision away. Do you decide you're worthy of it, or do you decide you're not? Do you decide you're capable, or do you decide you're not? Do you decide that you have to walk around in shame of your past and all your mistakes? Or you decide that that's just part of you that built who you are and you're free from, like, what are you deciding?
Yeah,
And
when
so
you make, and that's so true, because when you make the decisions of your whys, and your whys are so strong, there is nothing that can ever stop you. And the more whys will end up coming in. And that's what people need to understand.
Yeah.
Why are you doing it? And is it strong enough? And once that happens, wow, there's no turning me back. Absolutely not,
Yeah.
So anybody that's gone along this journey like you have, what advice would you give them? There's so many, isn't there?
There is so many, and my brain wants to dial in on like two. I would say number one, like do the brave thing.
Mhm.
Like it's brave to be rejected by your family for speaking your truth.
You betcha.
It's brave to look at your religious beliefs and say, actually, I don't believe that. That doesn't align with my core values and my principles and who I am. Like, do the brave thing. I think so many people are afraid, which I understand. Fear can be very, very real in our bodies, you know? And so fear of rejection, fear of judgment, fear of criticism, all of these things that we fear, I understand it can feel very real. I've experienced it firsthand. Do the brave thing, you know, be afraid to be rejected or sorry, lean into not being afraid of being rejected. Like, it's okay. You're going to be rejected. Guess what happens when you're rejected and people leave your life? It energetically opens up space for more people that are deeper in alignment to come into your life. And so I would say the first thing is be brave. Like, that's the first thing that I would say. And second, I would say, don't be afraid to reinvent yourself.
Mhm.
You know, these identities that we create, we attach ourselves to them. We're like, well, if I'm not so and so's wife, who am I? If
Mhm.
I'm not so and so with this title and this dollar amount of salary, who am I? Right? I've worked with so many people from all these different walks of life that they're so tied to this specific identity they've built in the world. Like, it's okay to reinvent yourself. It's okay to be in something, to be something or someone entirely new.
And
And
the
so
first and the first clue with that too, people that are so tied to this identity and they've got resistance, that resistance, the universe is letting you know that that is not the path that you need to be taking. That's why the resistance is
exactly.
there. So re-identify, re-look at, evaluate your identity.
Yeah. This is why I love universal law so much. And this is
Love
why
it.
I tell people that universal law has changed my life. It's
Yeah,
changed my life. The law of allowing,
yeah.
right? Allow. Let people, places, and things be exactly who they are. Because the moment you expect people, places, or things to be anything other than what they are is the moment you create the resistance within yourself. And as universal law tells us, what we resist persists. And
Mhm.
so if you keep resisting the thing, it's gonna be a battle. And if we can just let go and allow people to show you who they are, allow yourself to live your truth, detach, right? That's another one, law of non-attachment. Like, don't be attached to certain expectations. And when we can learn to let go of some of those things, we get more in the flow of life.
And you've seen it all over social media where, you know, when people show you who they really are, let them. If you're not invited to a party, that's okay. Let them, you know, continue on without you, whatever it is. And yeah, so that's why, and then you're seeing everybody now getting tattoos that say let them,
Let
you know,
them.
and that's so true. Like, let people be who they are.
Yeah.
Stand back and watch. Do you want them in your life or not?
Yeah.
You know, does that align with you or not? You know, automatically, do they
Yeah.
align?
I know I'll often say if they wanted to, they would.
Yeah, yeah,
They would. Like, I just feel that way in life. Like, you find a way or you find an excuse
yeah,
with anything, right? If we really want something, we will find a way to make it
yeah,
happen. And if we don't,
absolutely.
we'll find it. We'll find an excuse. We'll call it a reason, but
Mhm.
we'll find an excuse. So you find a way or you find an excuse. What is it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Oh gosh, this has been, I just loved my time with you for sure. Final question. Where are you now, Miss Mallory?
Oh, right now I am in a beautiful process of redefining is what I've been calling it the past couple weeks. I feel like I'm redefining yet again who Mallory is. I'm in the very beginning stages of writing a book, which I have done a few times in my life actually. I actually had a book deal a few years ago that fell through out of nothing that I did, but something with a company that fell through. And I just decided it wasn't the time, you know, and it was like, okay, well, it's going to come when it comes. And now it's starting to come.
Mhm.
It's really starting to come. I just recently started hosting online services, spiritual services. I don't really call it church. I'm a deeply spiritual person. I really love the Bible. I went through a phase where I hated the Bible, but I really love the Bible once I started studying the metaphysics of the Bible about 4 years ago, and I got into ministerial school. And I want to take people that have experienced the pain and the church hurt and the religious abuse that I experienced growing up, and help people deconstruct that, right? Whatever you call it, whatever name you have for it, whether it's God or source or love or creator or divine intelligence, makes no difference to me. I want to be a pillar of truth for people and a resource for people that want to reconcile their faith and their spirituality, but they're just not sure where they fall because they don't resonate with the dogma, but maybe they're not super into the woo woo of the spiritual community. It's like, where do we fall? What is it that I believe? And so I've started Sunday services. You can find the link it'll be on my website soon, but right now it's in the link in my social bios. So whether that's Instagram or TikTok, every Sunday morning, my partner and I are going live and teaching on the metaphysics of the Bible. And a book is coming and some new things on a platform. I won't say all the details yet because I'm still working on some things, but I'm really changing and restructuring how I'm going about the way I do business. Because the further I evolve and change, I think it reflects in everything that we do. And so speaking on more stages and getting in the depths of creating and birthing this book that is deep inside of me, and these Sunday services they're complimentary to the public. Anyone can come. I do them at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time every Sunday. They're live on TikTok, as well as a link that we provide through Zoom that people can log on if they feel more comfortable doing that. And you're not on TikTok, if you're somewhere else in the world on another platform. So those are the things that are really lighting me up right now that I'm working on.
Well, it sounds absolutely wonderful. And I want the audience to know as well, too, that in the notes of the podcast is where you'll be able to find everything about Malorie. But at this time, I want to say thank you so much, Malorie, for coming on my podcast, sharing your amazing insight, and just putting the word out there and helping individuals that are going through the exact same thing that you went through. Because there's a lot of information that you've shared with us. So thank you very much for, coming on and being a part of my journey, because I learned so much from you as well. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me.